What's up, ladies and gents? Welcome back to the garage. Today we've got a little accessory install job. We've got a 2017 Can-Am X3 XDS Turbo R and a little bit of a problem to solve. The customer has got a PCI radio, intercom, air pumper, and a windshield, which has already been installed, but the problem that we're having is real estate to mount the pumper mainly. So here's the pumper from PCI, really nice piece, billet, housing, 2 outlets. What I thought was really cool initially is that the variable speed dial is on the body of the pump itself. But then I started thinking, well, that means you got to be able to reach the dial while seated in the car if you want more or less air. So that means it's got to be in a spot where you can get to it and adjust it as needed. Unlike the rugged system that has a remote variable speed controller, this one is on the pump. So that means that this pump has got to be orientated somewhere where the driver can reach the controls for the variable speed. Now, machining on the back of the pump itself does match that tube there. However, the clamp that goes on the back side is nowhere near large enough to actually clamp it to that. My thought is to have the outlets facing forward along with the dial, but we'll actually rotate this over. And I'd like to mount it just like that. Now, in order to do that, I need something to hang it from. So here's the other problem that we're facing. This has got the Lone Star Racing flat roof kit on it. It's got the Can-Am spare tire carrier that unlocks, lifts up. However, with this roof and tire carrier combination, as you can see, there's no room in between the tire and the back of the roof. It doesn't open. It doesn't open far enough to get into the chest. So we've got a real compatibility issue here on these accessories. So my thought was, since we need a place to hang the pumper, and we also need to correct this issue with the tire carrier not clearing the roof, I'm going to put a piece of tube inside, probably tie it into this gusset here. I'll run straight across and catch that side over there. I have a tube with a couple of flanges on it, probably do some filler flanges on the outside just to thicken all this up and add some strength to it. And then I'll be able to mount the pumper on the bottom side of that bar, and then at the same time I can get rid of these clamps, which those actually scare the hell out of me. That's not far from your head. If you're not strapped in good and you go upside down, that's going to pop you right in the noggin. So anyway, those will go away. All I'll need is 2 tabs to come off of this new bar that I'm making, and I can attach this tire carrier to that on both sides. So that will allow me to make the tabs any length that I need to push the entire tire carrier back and give us the clearance that we need here so that this will actually function with this aftermarket roof. Now, one variable that we may have to deal with is, as this tire carrier moves back, these clamps on this C-pillar tube are going to have to slide down, and we don't have a lot of travel left before this starts getting into the body. So that may be something we have to address as well. But as you can see, I don't know if you can tell on this angle, but the carrier is actually not level as it is. So my thought is we can correct that with this new tube and new mounting tabs, get it to where it sits flat, still clears the trunk, and will actually open all the way up on these gas struts without hitting the roof. So that's the plan. Maybe if some of you have got the same issue, this will give you some ideas on how to resolve that. So I'm going to go ahead and start tearing this tire carrier off and mock up a tube and see how things look. Well, and while we're adding this tube, I thought we would go ahead and put tabs on there for the lighted whip, which is on this L bracket clamped on, or bolted on, I'm sorry, to the C-pillar. That can go away because if I've got a tube here, I can put a tab off of the tube to have the lighted whip come out here, and then do the same thing with the tab on the other side of the car for the antenna for the PCI radio that's going in. So this will be a nice kind of all-in-one tire carrier pivot point and pumper mount and lighted whip tab and antenna tab all in one. All right, a little bit of progress here. As you can see, I've already loosened these clamps for the link latches. I slid those down on the C-pillar tube as far as I could on both sides. That's as far down as we can go without having to do any clearancing on the bracket itself. And it already sits a lot more flat. Still got good clearance above the trunk, and you can see how much spacing to the rear that we've gained by doing that. So from here I'll get a piece of tube in there after I get those clamps out, and then start mocking up some tabs to hold that in place, and then we will be able to see if this thing will pivot on those and clear the roof. I didn't get it on video, but even with the tire off of there in the original location, this tube that supports the tire, it hits the roof even without the tire on there. So hopefully now that'll give us enough clearance to make that work. And then the rest of it's just pretty straightforward, adding tabs for other accessories. And if you didn't know, these C-pillars on these Can-Ams are not actually structural. All they do is keep the fenders on the back of the car from flopping around. This is hollow inside here. They're not even connected. This isn't a 6-point cage, it's only a 4-point cage. So ideally I want to tie into this gusset here to hold that tube rather than trying to clamp to this C-pillar that does nothing. All right, so those brackets are out of the way. And I just took a quick measurement from inside of this gusset to the inside of that one, and it looks like we're roughly 50 inches across. Probably before I cut my tube though, I'll go ahead and cut out some flanges to sit inside of those little pockets right there. Alright, so for this project I'm going to be using a combination of Redneck CAD, which is cardboard aided design, and actual CAD. So I've got my cardboard aided design here, working on these flanges that are going to go on the inside to mount to the tube. So obviously the circle is a representation of the 1 3/4 OD tube, and then I just kind of drew around the cardboard until I got a close shape that was close, and I think I got it dialed into where I want it. I did cut a little bit short over here. I didn't like the gap that it left on that end, so that's why the tape's there. You can always put it back with tape and then trim the tape and you get your overall representation of the part. So this will work for the outside and the inside. And you can see that roughly where the tube's going to land. So I will go ahead and cut out, probably go ahead and cut out all 4 of them. Just use the 2 on the inside to mount the tube to first. So I punched this hole, and it's a 1/4 inch diameter hole. I figured I'll put the tube right in this area centered over this hole right here, and then I'll be able to bolt through that hole, and I'll just punch one more hole back here, and then I'll have 2 bolts sandwiching it all together with the tube running right in center line with that hole right there. I'll show you the trick that I use to model this odd shape in CAD. There's a reason I put that 1/4 inch diameter hole there, not only just to align it where I needed it, but that's going to help me model this in the CAD software, and I'll show you how that works. So the first step in getting this component into CAD for me is going to be snapping a picture of said part. Try to get it perfectly above it as possible with no angle to it. Doesn't really matter how close you are as long as it's a clear image. Then I'll send that photo to my computer and I will use it as a canvas in CAD and basically trace the part. Alright, so I've got my CAD software opened up. I'm in sheet metal. I've already saved the photo that I took to my desktop, so I'm going to insert a canvas from my computer, desktop. There's our image. It's asking me which plane. I'm going to select this plane right here. I can resize this, not really necessary at the moment. Just go ahead and click OK. And once it's done, then we'll come over here to canvases, right click, calibrate, and now pick the first point on the canvas plane. So now what I want to do is, remember that's a perfect 1/4 inch diameter hole, so I'm going to select two opposite sides of it, and then I want to tell it that that is a 1/4 inch. And now it's to scale on my screen. So now it's just a matter of going in here and tracing this part with straight lines and some radiuses. I extrude it into a body, and then I go into the manufacturing side and I can write a cut file. And I'll cut 4 of these out. If I was only doing one, I probably would just do this by hand. But since I need 4 of them, it's worth the time to me to go ahead and draw it up in the computer and let the CNC plasma cut it out. There's our part. That should be pretty close to what we need. I'm going to go ahead and run 1 just to make sure it fits, and like I said, this should get us pretty close. I may have to do a little bit of clearancing on some of the edges, but I think that'll get us close enough. And we can go ahead and simulate this, see what it's going to do, just to make sure it's not doing anything weird. It shouldn't. Pretty simple part. It's cutting around the outside instead of the inside. It looks good. Alright, here we are. Filled the water table. Got a scrap piece of 10 gauge sitting on the table there. I've already loaded the G-code, zeroed the machine. I've run a dry run to make sure it's not going to run off the edge of the material. And I think we're ready to cut. Let's see what happens. And that would be a torch misfire. Round 2. Nope, still misfiring. 3rd time's the charm. Yeah, I'd say that worked. So it looks like we ended up actually slightly smaller than our cardboard cut. Let's see how it fits on the car. I could use a little trimming at the bottom perhaps, but that's not bad. Now does it still fit an 1 3/4 tube on it? It does. I can live with that. Oh, let's cut out 3 more. Alright, I've got 1 plate drilled and installed. I did go ahead and use one of the existing holes. The other hole that you saw is still in the middle underneath this, and I drilled 1 more hole here. And I made sure that I had enough spacing that when the tube goes on there, you got room for a washer and you can get a socket on there. So that's basically where it's going to land, obviously on the inside though. So I'll go ahead and punch out the other, 6 holes in the other 3 pieces, and we'll sandwich this all together and then measure for the tube. Alright, there we go. All 4 flanges are in place. 2 on the inside two on the outside. And I can measure inside face to inside face, and that'll give me the length of the tube that I need. Doesn't look too bad. So this all sandwiched together will give us over 1/4 inch of thickness. Should be plenty strong enough to hold the pumper, the antenna, and the lighted whip. And really, the only weight that this is seriously going to carry is going to be when this is lifted up, and the shocks will be assisting that. Most of the weight when this thing's down is on the link brackets down here. Should work out pretty good. I'm going to get a tube mocked up and then start figuring out the tabs for the tire carrier. Alright, so as you can see, I've got the tube cut to length, a little bit of massaging to get it in there. Sorry about the lighting. It's wedged in there up against the flanges. And it looks like I am going to be able to use a straight tube. I set the tire carrier back into place, latched it in at the link mounts. It looks like I'll be able to make a couple of tabs that come off the front and attach to it. And hopefully that will clear the roof. Won't actually know until I do it, so I'll probably cut out some little tabs, tack weld them on there, loosely bolt it together, and then give it a swing and see if it's going to work. But that's enough for tonight. It's past my bedtime. I'll continue this in a couple of days. And here's the rest of the tabs that I got cut out. 4 for the tire carrier pivots, and then 2 tabs, one to mount the antenna and one to mount the lighted whip. As you can see, I just kind of drew up some quick sketches here on the table. Changed the design on the tabs for the antenna and the whip slightly. I wanted to give it a little bit more strength, so these are actually going to be bent on those lines. That should give it enough strength that it won't bend versus just a regular tab that welds onto it. Turned out pretty good. Drew it up in the computer. Pretty good representation of what I had in mind. So we'll get these bent up and then mock it up on the tube. And here you can see we got the tabs for the tire carrier in place, just kind of mocked up. We'll tack them in and see if it pivots like I want it to. I am going to have to adjust the angle on these latches a little bit. My thought is that I'll slot these holes that these screws go through, and that should allow me to rotate it to the proper angle. Alright, those are bent up. I started to shoot a whole time lapse of bending these in the finger press brake, but then I realized that that wasn't going to work. It just wasn't. So I resorted to the vise and the hammer method. I think it turned out okay. I got the result that I wanted. Those will sit on there. Nice little contour that matches it. It should be fine. Alright, I'm ready to tack these in place. I did take a couple precautions though. Obviously a fire blanket, welding blanket, whatever you want to call it. Don't want any slag dropping onto the plastic and melting holes in it. I did also remove the passenger seat and disconnected the negative cable on the battery because I don't want to have to buy an ECM for this. Just in case, rather be safe than sorry. I had to get the seat out anyway because after all this is done, I got to install a radio and an intercom system, so I'll need to get to the accessory terminals inside the console anyway. So let's get this tacked into place and then we'll see if it works. There's nothing. Well, it works without a tire on it. Let's put a tire on it and try it. And it's quite a bit heavier. One-handed? You're gonna one-hand it, all right?
You think it'll?
You watch it, and I want just let me know if the tire hits the roof or gets close to it.
You're good to go.
Good to go? Right on.
The bar is closer than the tire.
Heck yeah. That was lucky. Thank you. I could have made some marks on the tube as to where I wanted the tabs to go and then welded it outside of the car, but the only sure way to make sure that the tabs are in the right spot is to assemble it and tack it into place. And it worked out. So now I can go ahead and tack the tubes onto the flanges at the end, and I'll mock up my little, where are they at? I'll figure out where these tabs for the antenna and the whip need to go, somewhere in here so that it clears the roof. Tack those into place. And then, something that's been haunting me the whole time that I've been designing this is, once it's all tacked together and I pull these bolts out of the flanges, is it going to come out of the car so I can weld it and then reinstall it? Alright, there's a better look at everything all tacked into place. Got two tabs, one on the right for the whip, one on the left the antenna, and then obviously the pivots for the tire carrier in, and it's tack welded to the flanges on the inside of the tubes. I'm ready to see if it comes out of there. I did hook the struts back up just to make sure that I didn't run out of travel or something crazy. I think that'll work. I'll see if I can get it out. Well, there it is. It's out of the car, and I didn't have to cut the car apart to get it out. So that's a plus. What I did have to do, though, right here on the bottom edge of this gusset, I just had to shave that down just about 1/8 of an inch on one side, and I was able to drop it out of there. So now I reassembled it with the tire carrier so I can finish weld this. I put this in there just because I don't want these to shrink as it welds, so that should help keep the proper spacing. We're going to weld it up and put it all back together. Alright, there it is, all cleaned up. Got all the slag off of it. Cleaned up. I had to clearance the welds a little bit for the nuts to fit in. If I were to do this again, I had to give myself a little more tolerance between where the bolts and the tube is. But I think that'll do. Where's my persuader? Just to get her in there. That's all we needed. Alright, rubber persuader. Fit. Notches. Oh yeah, plenty of room. Let's try with the tire on it. All the way up. Plenty of room. Look at that. Success. Now to tear it apart again and then get it to powder coat, and we'll put it together for the final time. right, fast forward about a week and a half. I've got this part back from powder coat and installed. Final assembly. You can see the pumper mounted in the center of it. Got some nice stainless button head screws holding the plates on the outside. Lighted whip is mounted. And you got the antenna mounted on this side. Plenty of room for everything. And just like before, it functions. No difference. Just powder coated. Easy access to change the filter on the pumper should you need to, when you need to. So that'll do it. On to the next disaster. Thanks for watching.